Hi there, fellow indie rock fans. I'm Billy T. Mushcat, and I'm going to share with you some of my favorite lo-fi indie rock records from the 1990s. In this episode, I'd like to feature my favorite 7-inch releases from the 1990s, starting back in, I believe it was 1992, with the Palace Brothers release Ohio Riverboat Song. On the B-side of this 7-inch, there's a tune called Drinking Woman, but really the featured track here is Ohio River Boat Song, which is still a standard in Will Oldham's repertoire. He just released a different version of it on an album a couple of years ago called Songs of Love and Horror, which features songs from his whole catalog as Palace Brothers, Palace Music, Bonnie Prince Billy, and now he's finally going by his own name, Will Oldham. Highly recommend this piece of wax with Ohio River Boat Song. Next, as we move into 1993, I couldn't get through 1993 without sharing a song by my favorite band, Guided by Voices, as you'll see by the t-shirt. This one is their EP Fast Japanese Spin Cycle, which was released on 7-inch, and it has a different version of Marchers in Orange. The album version was done with just organ, and it was on Vampire on Titus, the t-shirt you see me wearing today. But this one is a full band version, as well as some other gems that you're not going to find anywhere else, like Indian Fables. And yeah, it's just full. It's like 6 or 7 really great songs. It's a must-own. If you haven't heard this, try to find it on YouTube or wherever you can find it and give it a listen. You'll want to have a copy in your collection if you're a fan of indie lo-fi. While we're on the subject of Guided by Voices, in 1993, it was a hell of a year for them. They put out Vampire on Titus, and then, of course, Propeller. You can't top Propeller. But they also had another 7-inch called Static Airplane Jive, which contained Hey Aardvark, Big School, and half a dozen of great short songs. I highly recommend this one too if you're a fan of their Fast Japanese Spin Cycle and you want a good follow-up to it. This is the one I would recommend. As you may know by watching my first couple episodes of this series, I'm a Canadian, and so no episode would be complete without including some Canadian content. So as we approach 1994, this Eric's Trip release, Songs About Chris, is a pretty important one to discuss. It was put out on Sub Pop Records, but I believe it was first released on the indie label at a Halifax Murder. It contains hits like Hurt and Listen and a couple of other good ones. Highly recommend this if you're an Eric's Trip fan, if you like songs about, or if you like Peter or their later albums like Love Terra and Forever Again. This is a critical piece of that collection. Highly recommend it. But while we're on the subject of Canadian content from that era, a great band from Newfoundland that relocated to Halifax during the Murder Records period was Hardship Post. And this album, their full-length album is really good as well, but this single contains Watching You and Your Sunshine, 2 of my favorite songs off of their full-length. Highly recommend this one. Hardship Post. Speaking of 7 inches that contain just fully packed with hits, here's something that was released by Teenage Fanclub in the mid-90s. I think it was 95. Teenage Fanclub have lost it. On this single 7-inch, you've got Don't Look Back, Everything Flows, Star Sign, and 120 minutes. So it spans 3 or 4 different Teenage Fanclub albums, some of their best songs, but these are all acoustic versions. If you like Teenage Fanclub, I highly recommend picking this one up if you don't have it. As we enter the second half of the 90s, you started having releases by the Elephant Six Collective, or the Elephant Six Orchestra. One of my favorite contributors to their discography was the Apples in Stereo. And here's a 7-inch release of their Science Fair album. Now this has a lot of songs on it, but it comes in like 3 or 4 different 7-inches in one little box. As you can see, it's full of goodness, including the original recording of Tidal Wave, and the Hypnotic Suggestion EP, which is also very, very good, has Running in Circles and Touch the Water. Really good 7-inch there. And then you've got the Time for Bed single that had on the other side Olivia Tremor Control. Olivia Tremor Control put out one of my favorite albums of the 1990s, and I'll probably deal with it in a later episode in the second half of the 1990s, the late 90s. Dusk at Cubist Castle, or music from the unrealized film script Dusk at Cubist Castle, which is just a masterpiece of an LP. But like I said, I'll probably address that one in a future episode. But if you like Apples in Stereo, or the general sound of the Elephant Six Orchestra and Collective, Science Fair by the Apples in Stereo is a good starting point. Now, I did mention my favorite band earlier, Guided by Voices, but the Paul McCartney to Robert Pollard's John Lennon, side guy from the band Guided by Voices, Tobin Sprout, he put out a lot of great 7-inches during the 90s, and this is one of them. This is the Popstram EP that had Toaster on it, and some, 3 really great songs. I highly recommend getting a copy of this if you can find it, and if you don't have it. These albums aren't featured on any of his full-length albums. No discussion about the 90s would be complete without talking a little bit about Modest Mouse from Olympia, Washington. One of the, the greatest bands to come out of the late 90s. Here's a 7-inch that they put out in I think 96 or 97, just before their debut album. This is A Long Drive with Nothing to Talk About. This one has got one of my favorite singles, The Life of Arctic Sounds, on it. Medication on the B-side is a great tune as well. So highly recommend this Modest Mouse single. Comes on white vinyl. And last but not least, as we approach the end of the 90s, Smog was putting out some really good stuff. He later changed his name to his own name of Bill Callahan, and he's been putting out great stuff to this day. His last couple of records, the second last one, A Shepherd in a Sheepskin Vest, is so good. But I really like this single from Smog, Cold-Blooded Old Times. I highly recommend getting that one. Timeless classic from 1999. I hope you've enjoyed joining me for this, and I hope it does get you going down a rabbit hole or two. And I wish you all the best in your listening, and I hope to see you again. Have a great day.